They say in sales, every door hides a story. Some doors lead to success, others to rejection. But once in a while, a door opens to something you were never meant to see. Tonight's story is about a young salesman who knocked on the wrong door. In Japan, there are companies that specialize in door-to-door sales. Every morning, a van driver called the team leader drives a small group of salesmen, usually 5 people, and drops each of them off in different neighborhoods. Each salesman is responsible for his own area, knocking on doors and trying to convince strangers to sign a contract. When someone agrees to buy, the team leader will drive over with the official contract so the customer can sign it in person. It's hard work, but for people with confidence and good communication skills, it can be very profitable. The main character of this story is Takuya, a young man who was the company's top salesman. He was polite, smart, and good-looking. No one could close a deal like him. The driver of his van was Ryosuke, a calm middle-aged man who had looked after Takuya since his first day at work. They worked closely together, almost like mentor and apprentice, and became good friends. That morning, the company assigned Takuya and Ryosuke to a newly built housing district. The area was quiet, clean, and lined with rows of identical houses. Everything looked fresh, yet strangely lifeless. When they reached the neighborhood entrance, he stepped out with his briefcase and began walking down the empty street. He went from house to house, ringing doorbells, introducing himself politely, but no one answered. Some homes were completely silent. Others had faint sounds inside, like people pretending not to be home. It was normal in this line of work, but today felt unusually still, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. Finally, he reached the last house. He pressed the doorbell once more.
Hello.
A soft female voice came from the speaker, gentle, calm, and pleasant. Takuya's mood instantly lifted. He smiled and replied, "Hello, my name is Takuya. I'm here to show you some home-use products. It won't take long. Would it be okay to talk for a few minutes?" After a short pause, the door lock clicked. The front door opened slowly, and a young woman stood inside. She looked elegant and kind, her eyes warm and friendly. Her beauty was so natural that Takuya couldn't help but think, "This is going to be an easy one." The woman smiled.
It's hot outside. Please, come in and sit down. We can talk inside.
As soon as Takuya stepped inside the house, he noticed how strangely quiet it was. So quiet that even the sound of his own footsteps echoed faintly. The woman led him past a bright living room and into an open-style kitchen. He followed politely, still talking about the products he had brought, when something above caught his eye. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. But when he looked again, his breath caught in his throat. The entire ceiling was covered with baby photos. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. Different faces, different expressions. Some babies were laughing, some crying, some staring directly at the camera with emotionless eyes. The photos were all pasted side by side, edge to edge, leaving no space at all between them. The sight was so bizarre that his body stiffened. A chill crawled up his back, and for a brief moment, he wanted to turn and leave right there. But then he looked at the woman again. She was still smiling warmly, her expression gentle, as if nothing was unusual. That friendly smile somehow made it impossible for him to say anything. Takuya forced himself to calm down. "It's fine," he told himself. "Maybe she just loves children." He quickly pushed the unease out of his mind and got back to work. The deal was almost done, and he couldn't afford to lose it now. He began explaining the product again, demonstrating how to use the machine and cracking small jokes to lighten the mood. The woman nodded occasionally, showing interest, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Finally, she smiled and said, "It sounds wonderful. Please wait here while we finish the paperwork." Relieved, Takuya took out his phone and called Ryosuke. Within 10 minutes, Ryosuke arrived at the house with the contract folder in his hand. The moment he stepped into the living room, his gaze unconsciously lifted upward and then stopped. His face went pale. the ceiling, the endless baby photos. Even a man as experienced as Ryosuke couldn't hide his shock. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the folder and handed the woman a pen. Takuya noticed it too. The air felt heavier now, thick with something that made it hard to breathe. Still, he tried to keep his voice steady and professional as he pointed out where she needed to sign. Just when Ryosuke quietly said, "And here too, please stamp your name." A deep, hoarse moan suddenly came from the other side of the sliding door nearby. The sound was low and rough, clearly a man's voice, but filled with pain, resentment, and something else Takuya couldn't describe. It wasn't loud, but it was so close it felt like it came from just behind the thin door. Both men froze on the spot. They looked at each other, their faces drained of color, and then turned back toward the woman. The friendly expression she had worn moments ago was completely gone. Her face was blank, emotionless, and her eyes, dark and hollow, stared straight at Takuya. The moaning behind the door grew louder, changing rhythm like someone struggling to breathe. Then came another sound, short, sharp, almost like choking mixed with laughter. It made the hair on Takuya's arms stand up. The woman's lips began to move slightly. A faint, broken whisper escaped her throat, a noise so soft that neither of them could tell if she was laughing or crying. Takuya's hands were shaking. He forced himself to speak, trying to sound calm. "Ma'am, if you could please stamp here," he said. The woman slowly lifted her head. Her mouth stretched unnaturally, corners pulling upward in a way that no human face should. Then came that sound, the sharp, metallic laughter, high and screeching, like nails scraping on glass. It was laughter, but there was no joy in it. Her face remained completely still, expression frozen, only that terrible sound echoing around the room. Behind the sliding door, the man's voice rose to a scream, an agonized, drawn-out wail that mixed with the woman's laughter until the two sounds became unbearable. Ryosuke's voice broke first. "We have to go now." Takuya didn't argue. He shoved the sample machine, papers, and pen into his bag, bowed quickly without another word, and turned to run. The moment they stepped out of the living room, the laughter stopped. Takuya's body moved on instinct. He bolted down the steps, with Ryosuke close behind. They ran until their legs ached, jumped into the car, slammed the doors shut, and sped out of the neighborhood without looking back. Neither of them spoke a single word for the rest of the ride. Takuya didn't sleep at all that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he could hear the woman's shrill, broken laughter echoing in his head, like the sound of tape being torn from its roll. Morning came, and exhaustion hit him like a weight, but then he remembered something that made his stomach drop. He had left the sample machine inside that house. It was an expensive demonstration unit that belonged to the company. If it went missing, he would have to pay for it himself. The thought alone made his skin crawl, but losing his job would be even worse. He hesitated for hours before finally picking up his phone. "Ryosuke-san," he said quietly, "can you come with me? I have to go back. I left something there." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Ryosuke sighed. "All right, but we go together, and we don't stay long." By the time they reached the neighborhood, the sun was bright and the air warm. The streets looked perfectly normal, peaceful even. In the daylight, the fear from last night felt like some strange dream. The two men stood at the entrance of the familiar house, staring at the wooden door. Neither of them wanted to be the first to move. Finally, Takuya forced himself to breathe deeply and reached toward the intercom button. But just before pressing it, something caught his eye, the small gas meter beside the door. "Ryosuke-san, look at this." On the meter, a white tag fluttered gently in the wind. Printed clearly on it were the words, "Vacant house. Gas supply terminated." A chill ran through both of them. He pressed the doorbell anyway. Once. Twice. No answer. The house stayed silent. They exchanged a nervous glance and finally called the housing management office. When the staff arrived, they listened to the story with skeptical eyes but agreed to open the door. "Let's just check inside," the man said, fishing out a key. The lock clicked and the door creaked open. Dust floated in the air. The smell of old wood and damp carpet filled their noses. Inside, everything was covered with a thin layer of dust, as if no one had entered for months. The furniture was gone. The floorboards were dull and stained. There were no photos on the ceiling, no sign of life anywhere. The two salesmen stood frozen in the doorway. Ryosuke's voice trembled as he whispered, "Then, who were we talking to?" Takuya said nothing. His eyes wandered across the room until they fell on something lying in the middle of the floor. It was the sample machine. Clean, untouched, sitting quietly on the wooden floor, exactly where he had left it. The truth hit him all at once. What happened the day before was no dream. They had really stepped into that house. And whatever lived there, whatever smiled at them, was not human. For the next few days, Takuya barely spoke to anyone. He stayed home with the curtains closed, avoiding phone calls and visitors. Even Ryosuke couldn't reach him. When his supervisor finally visited in person, he found Takuya pale and thin, sitting by the window like a shadow of himself. "Listen," the supervisor said gently. "You don't have to go back there. Forget that place. As long as you return to work, we'll assign you safer areas, old neighborhoods, apartments, anything you like." Takuya hesitated, then nodded slowly. A week later, he came back to the office. He smiled, joked with his colleagues, and even joined them for lunch. On the surface, he seemed fine, but Ryosuke noticed something different. The light in his eyes was gone. When Takuya smiled, it never reached his face. It was just a mask. A few days later, Ryosuke was once again driving the van. He dropped Takuya off at a customer's apartment building, the same routine as always. The place was ordinary, the kind of middle-class complex they visited every day. Ryosuke waited in the van, engine idling softly. He had watched Takuya straighten his tie, step out, and disappear into the apartment building's glass doors. 10 minutes passed. The phone on the dashboard rang, Takuya's name glowing on the screen. He answered. Silence. Only faint static filled the line. Ryosuke frowned. "Takuya?" But no voice came back. There was a pause. Then a sudden scream tore through the phone. It was Takuya's voice, high, terrified, and raw. The scream was followed by the sound of running, something crashing to the floor, and then laughter. That sound, that horrible, sharp, metallic laughter, the same one they'd heard in that house. Ryosuke's blood ran cold as twisted laughter echoed through the phone. He slammed his foot on the pedal, the van tearing down the narrow streets toward the apartment. When he arrived, he found Takuya curled up in the stairwell, trembling, pale, his suit wrinkled and soaked with sweat. His eyes were wide, unfocused, as if still seeing something that wasn't there. Ryosuke dropped to his knees beside him, but Takuya couldn't speak at first. His lips moved soundlessly before a broken whisper escaped. She was there again. The rest came out in fragments, bits of memory choked by panic. The apartment, he said, had looked perfectly normal. A calm, polite woman had greeted him. Everything went smoothly, almost too smoothly. But when he reached for his phone to call Ryosuke, her face began to twist, and the laughter returned. Her eyes darkened, her mouth stretched unnaturally wide, and her skin rippled like something was moving underneath. In seconds, her features changed, and she became the same young woman from that cursed house. She smiled at him, the corners of her mouth trembling, and whispered, "We meet again." Then came that sound, the horrible, broken laughter that split through his skull. Takuya screamed and ran from the apartment, never once looking back. After that day, he never returned to work. No one could reach him by phone, and when the company sent people to his apartment, it was empty. He had vanished completely. Some said he quit and moved far away to start over. Others whispered that he'd lost his mind and been taken to a hospital. But Ryosuke never believed those stories. After Takuya's disappearance, the story spread quietly through the company. Some believed it was a true event that had happened to a salesman from the head office. Others dismissed it as nothing more than an exaggerated ghost story, something old employees told to scare the new recruits. But even those who laughed about it would lower their voices whenever his name came up. The company changed its policy soon after. No one was sent to that new residential area again. The district itself gradually fell silent, as if people simply forgot it existed. Yet every now and then, someone claimed to see lights flicker in one of the empty houses there, just for a second, and then vanish. Ryosuke left the company a few months later. Those who met him afterwards said he had become a nervous man. Rumors about the house grew over time. Some said a terrible crime had once happened there. A young couple, newly married, living happily until the wife lost her sanity after childbirth. One night, she strangled her baby and then took her own life. Others whispered that the baby photos on the ceiling had been placed there by the mother herself, each one representing a life she wished she could bring back. No one knew the truth, and sometimes delivery men or sales staff passing by would swear they saw someone standing at the window, a young woman in white, smiling softly, her eyes following them as they walked away. As for Takuya, no one ever found him. But sometimes, late at night, the company phone still receives strange calls. A quiet male voice says politely, "Good evening. I'm a salesman from the company. May I have a few minutes of your time?" Then, after a long silence, comes that same sharp laughter, and the line goes dead.